So I know that some more people will be hopping on shortly, but let's jump in. We already have kind of jumped in, but so for those of you that just hopped on, good to see you. Thank you for being here. And friends, let's just settle in for a moment. You know what I like to do as far as that. I want to invite you just to close your eyes, because the reality is that no matter what's going on around us relationally, emotionally, geographically, and physically, spiritually, we're enfolded in the beautiful and powerful love of the Father, Son, and Spirit. And that's the solid ground that we stand on. And I know that can sound cliche, but it's also true. And so I want to invite you just to feel your feet on the ground, to breathe in the beautiful life of the Spirit. Breathe out anything that's been weighing on you, anything that's been causing you angst. Breathe in all the goodness that you want to receive, and breathe out anything that you want to let go of. And we say, Holy Spirit, we invite you. No, let me rephrase that. We invite our awareness to be centered on you. And we do invite you. We know that you're here and we're in you, but at the same time, there's something about turning up the dial, and something that happens when we intentionally enter into space with you. And so, Father, and Jesus, and Spirit, meet with us as we as a community need this morning. Would you help the creativity and connection to flow? And may we be surprised by what you have in store for us. So we let go of any expectation or agenda, and we open ourselves to the infinite love of who you are. All right. So, friends, what I'm going to do, instead of entering in at the beginning to a worship song, I'm going to hold that for the end. And we're going to kind of end on that note. And I wanted to jump into, so a very important thing to ask you all. Who all saw the email with an invitation to print something off for the morning? Will you, if you have that thing printed off, or if you have access to it, will you hold it up and show us? And if you don't, is anybody able to print in a matter of moments? Because I can put it back. Okay, wonderful. Do you all have something to write with? That's going to be important as well. Kind of goes without saying, but it never hurts to over communicate. So for those of you that either missed the email, awesome, Carol, I see that pin. For those of you that missed the email, I'm going to drop the file in the chat bar one more time, because it's kind of important to me that you have this. And if you need to take a minute to print that, then feel free to step away for a moment and do that. Okay? All right. So as we have a few more friends joining us, I love it. There, Rachel found us, and Angelique, and Hayden, Christy, and Claire. Cool. So, all right, friends, I want to jump in by showing you something that happened to me, and then what it has to do with this paper that I printed out for you. So, can you guys get a good view of that?
Oh, wow.
I lost some weight recently. And it makes it really complicated as far as where I can put my arm down, and but you might have seen on Facebook or Instagram, if you believe in those things, this and my legs got a good dose of it too, but that was the result of me pushing it just a tiny bit too hard going mountain biking with my son Zach. And I've always played it pretty careful, but we went up to this place called Bogus Basin, and you take the lift up about half a mile, and then they have these amazing runs that you can take down, and you don't have to do any of the uphill work. And so Zach and I did about 3 hours of this, and we did 10 rides up the lift, and we did about 16, 17 miles worth of downhill riding. And so the first 8 trips down, he led the way. And so we went at his pace, went on the trails that he wanted to go on. And then for the last two, I was like, you know what, it's my turn to lead. I want to play around a little bit. And so round 9, trail 9, I pushed it a little bit. And then on the 10th one, I was like, all right, I'm gonna kind of take it to the next level a little bit. And so I was going down, and there's this jump, and there's two options to the jump. There's a smaller one, and then there's a little bit bigger one. The bigger one happens to be up on the side of the hill. And so I hit the bigger one going decently fast, and I didn't land back on the solid part of the jump. I landed up on the side where the dirt is soft. And before I even realized what happened, I'm down on the ground with my bike tangled up in me, and I'm sliding across the dirt thinking, I don't even know what happened just now. And I got up and I just felt pain and tingly and stinging all over my body. And Zachy came up behind me and he stopped and he was like, oh my gosh, Daddy, like, what did you do? Are you okay? And got up and just blood dripping everywhere. And my bike was in a mangled, tangled mess. And I was like, man, that's what happens when things are moving fast and we don't have solid ground underneath us. And this was about 4 days ago, and I'm still feeling it. You can imagine. And so using that story, not to make this a cheesy, corny segue, but to transition into the sheet that I gave you. So just yesterday, we're at this place called Mod Pizza. And I don't know if any of you have heard of that place, but it's like Blaze or like Pyology, but it's a create your own pizza. We're at Mod Pizza. It was our third attempt at finding a restaurant to eat and not have to wait an hour. And as I'm about to leave, there's a little girl about 2.5 years old throwing a huge temper tantrum on the floor. And her dad is trying to kind of gather her up and collect her, and he takes her outside to get her to calm down. While that's going on, 4 of the employees are having a full-on argument in front of all of us customers. And there's this bald, kind of built-looking guy that had said something really simple to one of the employees, and it was him and 4 girls, and it was like it became him against these 4 girls. And they just had this full-on argument in front of all of us, to the point where the manager ended up asking the guy to go home in front of all of us. And we're just like, what is, and in the midst of all this, our boys are kind of losing their patience. And there were just so many dynamics. And Sarah and I were talking on our drive home, and we're like, we just witnessed 3 or 4 different meltdowns in the span of about 5 minutes. And it feels like that is just like the state of the world, is just that so many of us are so quick to melt down. It's like, in the same way that I didn't have physical stability under me on my mountain bike and I paid the price for it, it just seems like, as I look around and as I look at kind of my own internal dynamics, it seems like we're so close to meltdown mode, and there's just not much emotional stability, emotional solid ground underneath us. So, question for you: has anybody else? We're going to move into a little bit of a Catholic mode here and invite a little bit of confession time. Has anybody else either come close to or felt like they've had a meltdown mode in the last couple days? Yeah. Does anybody in the chat bar want to just tell us anything about what meltdown has looked like for them, whether something that triggered it or whether something that, whether kind of the way it came out for you? Right, Tiffany? Are you watching me at home somehow? So let's have a little moment of, let's have a little moment of confession. Tell us about your most recent meltdown. And we can do it in the chat bar, unless somebody wants to unmute and share. How many of you would love to hear about somebody else's meltdown to make you feel better? Yeah. Anybody want to share with us verbally what happened recently? How many of you have found yourself asking that question lately? When is it going to stop? And so just knowing, kind of just being able to check in with ourselves. So Claire, I'm sorry and thank you, but thank you for sharing. And I'm glad you got some support in the form of some hints coming your way. So yeah. Maybe one more person. Is there anybody else that wants to just maybe, John, what's wrong with roosters? They're too, we're going to let you and Claire have a little sidebar chat about that. But anybody else just have something that they want to offload, maybe a meltdown experience, or just a feeling of this has been too much and you'd like to get it off your chest. I'm looking for people trying to brave up. So I'm gonna just start calling on people. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to do that to you. But well, okay, we'll leave it at that unless somebody else kind of comes around. They're like, look, I'd really like to share this. But um, so here's what I wanted us to do. So some of you know that I like to take verses that we've all heard over and over and over and kind of reframe them in ways that are more fitting to the context and the original intent, at least according to my study and learning. And before we get to that sheet, what I want us to do is I want to invite you to look at a passage that's probably super familiar, but it's found in Philippians chapter 4. Okay, anybody remember the book of Philippians? So I invite you to turn on or turn in your Bibles to Philippians chapter 4. And this letter was written by the Apostle Paul while he's imprisoned in Rome to this group of believers in Philippi, which was a Roman colony. And you can imagine the level of persecution, the challenges that they're facing. There's so much background here, but for the sake of time, we're just going to keep in mind that Paul is writing this from prison, and that this group of believers, he wants to let them know about someone's health. He wants to thank them for their support. They were one of the few churches that supported his ministry financially. And so, but what I want you to listen for here is a verse that we hear over and over that gets taken out of this passage, and we'll actually stop there, and then we'll kind of, well, yeah, you'll see what we're going to do. So I want to invite you just to jump in. If you're turned to Philippians 4, will you show me? Hold up your Bible and let's make sure that we're all literally on the same page. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to read it. This is from the Common English Bible, and I'll invite you to either listen or read along in your own translation if you'd like, okay? So Paul says, therefore, and we're just going to hold off on talking about what the therefore is there for in this case, because we want to get into the meat of what he's saying here. My brothers and sisters whom I love and miss, which is true for my heart as well, who are my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord. Loved ones, I urge Eudia, and I don't know how to pronounce her name. Let's say Sintiche, because that's probably not how it is pronounced, but it sounds kind of fun to say it that way. I urge you, Eudia, and I urge Sintiche to come to an agreement in the Lord. Yes, and I'm also asking you, loyal friends, to help these women who have struggled together with me in the ministry of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my coworkers whose names are in the scroll of life. Be glad in the Lord always. Again I say, be glad. Let your gentleness show in your treatment of all people. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything. Rather, now this is one of those verses that is not meant to heap guilt upon us, but this is simply an invitation to shift perspective from the anxiety to kind of a fuller picture of the emotional spectrum, balancing out our anxiety with offering it back to God and also focusing on what we're grateful for. I love how Paul does that here. Don't be anxious about anything. Rather, bring up all of your requests to God in your prayers and petitions, along with giving thanks. Then the peace of God that exceeds all understanding will keep your hearts and minds safe in Christ Jesus. From now on, brothers and sisters, if anything is excellent And if anything is admirable, focus your thoughts on these things. All that is true, all that is holy, all that is just, all that is pure, all that is lovely, all that is worthy of praise. Practice these things. Whatever you learned, received, heard, or saw in us, and the God of peace will be with you. Verse 10, I was very glad in the Lord because now at last you have shown concern for me again. Of course, you were always concerned, but had no way to show it. I'm not saying this because I need anything, for I've learned how to be content in any circumstance. I know the experience of being in need and of having more than enough, and I've learned the secret to being content in any and every circumstance, whether full or hungry, or whether having plenty or being poor. Now, verse 13, we've probably never heard before. How does verse 13 go? Would you put it in the chat bar? Philippians 4:13. Who's heard this before this morning? How does it normally go? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Friends, I hate to say this as a pastor, but that's not true. How many of you have heard people tell you Philippians 4:13, and then the moment you think about it, you're like, actually, that's not true at all? Question for you. Can I do a brain surgery through Christ who strengthens me? Can I unravel the mysteries of the quantum universe through Christ who strengthens me? Can I understand all of Dave's biomedical engineering PhD research with my background in pastoral ministry? So I just wanted to discourage you. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't want to discourage you. How many of you have found that Philippians 4:13 in its normal translation is actually not very helpful? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and then you realize, wait a minute, that's totally not the case at all, because the reality is there's a lot of things I can't do, even with Jesus living in me. So what if that's not what Philippians 4:13 is trying to say? Can I give you two alternative translations to Philippians 4:13 that I think that I found much more helpful? And you can tell me if this is meaningful to you at all. Let me read you from the Common English Bible, and then I'll tell you one more, okay? Here's how this Bible has it translated. I can endure all things through the power of the one who gives me strength. I'll say that one more time. I can endure all things through the power of the one who gives me strength. Here's one other translation of Philippians 4:13 that I love. And this is what the Greek word, the Greek phrase is actually implying this. It's better stated as, I can face all challenges through Christ who empowers me. I can face all challenges, face all circumstances through Jesus who empowers me. I see some heads nodding. How many of you already find that much more true to reality and much more helpful than I can generally do all things through Christ who gives me strength? Now notice and remember, let's go back again to the context. Paul is saying this in the context of challenging circumstances and abundant circumstances. He's saying, I've learned to face all circumstances, and that I can endure all circumstances through Christ because I've learned to be content through Jesus's empowerment. So I'm going to pause my sharing for a moment there, and I want to open it up to you, whether it's in the chat bar or whether it's verbally. How does just that shift in phrasing change the meaning, and what does that make you think? That difference of I can face or endure all things versus I can do all things. I'd love some feedback, some playback from some of you about what that means and how that changes things for us. So Laura said, yeah, so Dave said, more about contentment in all circumstances. Exactly. Laura said, let's talk about emotional breakdowns. Yes, the verse is so unhelpful, it creates guilt, right? Just be fine, right? There's a big difference between enduring, right? Enduring has this sense of like there's, I don't know how to describe it, but enduring has this sense of like, this is challenging, this is difficult, I can do all things, makes it sound like Jesus just makes us all super people, and that there's no challenge and nothing's a big deal, right? I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. Wow, that's the message. Dang. Yeah, enduring is, I agree, enduring, facing is much more helpful. Let's hear from some of you. What does that mean to you? Or why would that matter if it means I can endure or face all things? I need to move my chat bar a little bit. Claire says the alternative translations emphasize relationship and companionship rather than individualism. That's a huge insight, Claire. I love that. Yeah. How many of you see that as well, what Claire is saying there? That emphasizes the relational reality of Jesus is the one sustaining us through the challenge, right? Instead of this superpower that I can flex my Jesus muscles over anything I want to try to do. Oh, Timothy says, yeah, it's more passive, but not in a negative way, right? It's almost like more, yeah, you said submission, or it's more of a surrender, right? I can endure because I'm allowing Jesus to help me move forward. Caroline says, I feel like I don't have to be a superhero in all situations, but I can exist, acknowledge the hard things, and get through them. Facing and enduring is an acknowledgement of struggles without putting on the burden of fixing it. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I love that, Caroline. What else, friends? What else does that mean to you? The shift from I can do all things to I can face or endure all things. How many of you felt recently like you don't know if you can? How many of you are like, Jesus, I don't know how much more of this I can take? Like, where's my breaking point? That's, for some of us, that's a real question, right? Christy said, contentment is a potent word and includes surrender and a peacefulness and trust in circumstance that tests us to the core that would, without God's strength, undo us. Yeah, absolutely, Christy. Well said. Angelique said, this makes it less about ability and accomplishment and shifts it to sustaining just being and contentment. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say, Angelique. Thank you. About the difference between doing and enduring, right? It's more about just standing firm, right? It's not about going off and, yeah, it's just stand your ground. Just do your best to stand firm. Jason says, is it possible to read as this? All the things I do, I can do through Christ. So flipping it a little bit, that's a good, I don't have an immediate answer to that, Jason, but I think it's a great question. Larry says this shifts from phony to real. Right. Anybody else ever, Larry, did you just call Philippians 4:13 phony? Because I kind of did too, so that's okay. I hope that's fine. We're both in the same boat here. Yeah. And Dave says, in the circle of the Trinity, God endures the storm that we feel. When we step out of God's refuge, we feel the brunt. Yeah. Riley and Hannah and Jill, good morning. You just jumped into us calling Philippians 4:13 phony and reframing it. So we're kind of calling out some non-helpful scripture. So that's what you just stepped into. Yeah. Cheryl says steadfastly faithful. Good morning, Dennis. Yeah. So So what I was proposing is that a better translation of Philippians 4:13 is, I can endure or face all things through Christ who strengthens me. So if you have more thoughts and comments or insights into that, please keep them coming in the chat bar. What I wanted us to do is I want to make sure, so Riley, Hannah, Jill, Dennis, since you all just joined us, did you all, well, let's see, anybody else not have a chance before we move forward to print out the sheet that I sent in the email? The emotional reservoir. Okay. So the three of you that just joined, I'm going to get you going in a moment while I get everybody else started. Okay. So what we've been talking about is having some emotional solid ground, emotional footing underneath us. And so for those of you that don't have this, just hang tight and I'll get you going in a moment. But what I passed out was, I'm going to share my screen, a sheet that looks like this. Can you all see that? So at the top, it has the question, how do I refill my emotional reservoir? That's a phrase. So in our family, we kind of talk about our emotional reserve, our emotional tank, or our emotional reservoir. And you can tell when your emotional reservoir is getting low, when you feel more, what? Let me stop the sharing. How would you each describe what it looks like when your emotional reservoir is getting low compared to when your emotional reservoir is full? How can you tell? Give me some words in the chat bar. I'm gonna, yeah, so Tiffany says, lacking energy, feeling drained. Rachel, like my world is small, like I have no purpose in the daily. Irritable. Cheryl, I stole your word, or vice versa. Nicole says tired. Dave says insecurity in circumstances and relationships. Yeah. Laura says lonely. Christy, less tolerant of others, taking my frustration out on others. Caroline, easily discontented. Judy, fearful. Cheryl, frustrated. Yeah, these are all, this idea of an emotional reservoir doesn't take a lot of explanation, right? We all get it intuitively, and we all can kind of feel when our emotional tank is being depleted. The question is, yeah, so I like that pissy attitude. Sam says, goalie tells me I become irritable. Yeah, she's right, Sam. Just kidding, dude. Dennis, dualistic thinking. I love the broad space of these answers. Anxiety. Yeah, so here's what I wanted us to make sure to be able to spend some time on this morning, is not just to know what it's like when our emotional reservoir is being depleted, and not just to generally know what it looks like to refill it. How many of you have a general sense of what it looks like, what activities can help you refill your emotional tank? Show me some hands if you kind of generally speaking know, look, I need to get some of this. Okay. Would it be helpful for anybody else besides me to actually have like a quick reference shortcut sheet of, look, I only have 5 minutes and I'm about to lose my mind, and I've already front loaded some of the activities onto my cheat sheet so that I can be a better human to my friends? Would you be willing to take a few minutes and worksheet through some of that right now? That's the heart of this activity. Because the reality is that we don't need necessarily a full day. We don't even need a couple hours. Sometimes in just 5 minutes, if the emotional recovery is quality enough, you can shift the whole next part of your day if you come in with an intentionality. And so we're going to do a couple layers to this. So we all know what it feels like to be emotionally depleted. Let me ask you this before we jump into the activity. What does it feel like to be emotionally full? How can you tell? How does it come through your behaviors, your attitude, and your mindset when your emotional reservoir is more towards the side of full than depleted? Share with us in the chat bar, please. Claire says energized. Laura says more calm. Cheryl, joyful. In order to keep up, I might not read the names of everyone, but I'll just read the comment. Content in relationship with the Lord, peace, generous and kind, more grateful, calm and or joyful, synchronized, still, listen, centered, cheerful, present. Yeah, these are great words. I'm going to take all those. I'm going to borrow all those. Able to prioritize, contented. Yeah, keep those words coming. So here is the opportunity and invitation for all of you. I'm going to drop this PDF one more time in the chat bar for those of you that didn't get to access it. So Dennis, Hannah, Riley, anybody else that got on, Nicole, any of you that weren't able to, go ahead and grab this PDF out of the chat bar. And if you have access to print off quickly, now is the time to do that. For everybody else, I'm going to invite you to take your pen and your paper and go ahead and start. You can either start with the 5-minute bucket. You can start anywhere on the map. You might just kind of want to just brain dump some of the different activities. But what we're doing is we're filling up these spaces with different activities that we know when we have 5 minutes, when we have 10 minutes, when we have 1 hour. What are some of your go-to activities that you can lean into and rely on to help refill your emotional reservoir? Okay. This is fun for me because I feel like I get to kind of tap into Professor Chris a little bit, kind of facilitate a little bit of a classroom activity. What questions do you all have about what we're doing before we jump in? Okay. So I'm going to assume that you all are set to go. Okay. Well, if you have more thoughts or more things that you want to write down, go ahead and keep doing that. But what I want to do is give us some time to process and even crowdsource some ideas with each other. So let's start with a full day. Would you put in the chat bar for us, when you have a full day, imagine if that's ever a reality for anybody, but just imagine in some world and time and space that you have a full day. What's a way that you would spend a day that would refill your emotional reservoir? Would you tell us something about it in the chat bar? Day at the beach? Give me a thumbs up if anybody else had day at the beach, like Cheryl. Okay. Give another thumbs up if you had day at the beach with friends. I'm not going to accuse you of not social distancing. That's up to you how you want to navigate that. But yes, so day at the beach and day at the beach with friends. Okay, now they're popping through. Go for a walk, hike in nature. I forgot about that one, Nicole. Thank you. I'm going to add that to my list. What else do we have? Drive to the mountains. Drive to parents in the Bay Area. Reading, naps, hike, and podcasts. A long car drive. Yeah, I need to go for a drive sometimes. A long hike. Quality art time, family time. Long hike or cycling. Read. Watch the cows. Sweet. Hike in nature. Silence and solitude with a good book and journal. Read. Long motorcycle ride. Clean. All right, Mike, let's talk, my man. Awesome. If anyone else wants to put some in there, but thank you for those of you that shared things there. Now, We're going to work our way back a little bit because it's very possible that for some of us, having a full day becomes less and less frequent, right? And so one of the things that I wanted us to be able to see is that powerful emotional recovery can happen even in as short as 5 minutes. But we're not going to go there just yet. So what about 1 to 2 hours? What were some of the responses, some of the things that you all put in the 1 to 2 hour bucket? A walk, nap, walk or bike ride, hike, walk, run, call a close friend that can hold space for me and talk it out, nap, bike ride, long walk, shoot hoops, walk with a friend, garden, dance, coffee with friends, calling family, spend a couple hours at the river, nap. Love it. Keep it coming. Let's hear a few more. Reality test? Chat, call a friend, put my phone away intentionally for a few hours, play bananagrams, bike ride, music. Judy, I rode a tricycle like yours, but not electric the other day. It is not for the faint of heart. It was throwing me off a little bit. So more kudos to you for how you're able to move on that thing. Read. Janie says, I love bananagrams. There's an invitation there for you guys to play some online bananagrams. Yeah. It's so tempting for me to point out, but I don't need to. I think all of you probably noticed. I didn't see anybody say scroll on Instagram for 2 hours. Sorry, I said it. I wasn't going to say it, but I said it. Dang it. Okay. Meditate. Look at photos of wildflowers. Awesome. So there's great stuff in there. Let's keep us moving. Let's look at, what about 10 to 15 minutes? What are some ways for each of you that when you only have 10 to 15 minutes that you can get some emotional recovery? Let's see, where do we FaceTime with a friend, lay down, call Hannah Flicked. Awesome. Stretch. They're moving so fast now. Silence. Go outside and listen to birds. Scream into a towel. I've done that one, Cheryl. Do a breathing exercise. Meditation. 1 year Bible. Dave, that's 1 year. That's not 10 to, I'm just kidding. Listening prayer and worship music. Listen to good music. Quick walk around the block. Put your feet up. Walk around my building. Scroll on Insta, Facebook so I feel connected. Okay, all right. No shame for that one, Rachel. It's the connection, right? It's not the escape, it's the connection. Thank you for clarifying. Sorry for pastor shaming you. Right, to stay connected to those you're far from. Love that. Prayer, gratitude, listen, hit the floor, like that could mean a few different things. Welcoming prayer, ask God for help, then listen, or dance hard. Coffee, movement, play guitar, walk, garden, connect with others on the phone, etc. Great answers coming through, friends. Okay. How many of you found the 5-minute one to be a little tougher? Actually, let's ask this way. I would love for each of you to put in the chat bar, which bucket did you find the hardest to find activities for? Let's ask it that way. It'll be interesting to see kind of where we're at in season of life here as well, right? So let's kind of get a pulse on this. So someone said 5. I see a lot of full day, bucket all day, 5 minute, full day. Interesting, it's both the extremes, right? So it seems like one of the challenges is we don't know what to do. By the way, what we're describing here, in some senses of the term, a full day of filling your emotional reservoir, some people used to call that Sabbath. So what some of us are acknowledging is that we have kind of maybe lost touch with the practice of Sabbath, or maybe we're in a season of life that makes Sabbath more difficult. But the original intention of Sabbath wasn't to do this passive resting, don't touch anything, but it's actually a proactive delight. Sabbath was meant to lean into absolute delight and refreshment. So that's a bigger conversation for another day. But if you find yourself struggling to know what to do with a full day, there's an invitation to meet with the Trinity and reframe or recover a practice of Sabbath in your worlds. And then for some of us, the 5 minutes is tough because it's just like, well, that's not enough time to really do anything of depth, right? But I want to challenge that idea. And so how many of you who else noticed that nobody put either of the two middle ones? Nobody said 1 to 2 hours and nobody said 10 to 15 minutes. It's both, it was purely either side of the spectrum. I think that's very interesting. So in light of the 5 minutes being a challenge for some of us, let's crowdsource this. What are some of the activities that you wrote down or that we can do? What refills your emotional reservoir, or at least starts to drip back into it when you only have 5 minutes? What can you do when you only have 5 minutes? So someone said a 5-minute meditation, gaze at nature, audio texting with friends whom I can say anything. I would say that's probably more than 5 minutes, Janie, from what I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding, but seriously. What else? No, I love that you have that, Janie. Breathing exercise, silence, close my eyes. Josie, welcome. Lay down, eyes closed, and listen to The Secret Place by Phil Wickham. Yeah, so having a song, right? How many of you have a song that you know that if you just have a couple minutes, you can go to this one song and get a quick little reset for your emotional equilibrium? It's a really powerful thing to know and have. Let's see. What else? So reassure myself, right? So just kind of some self-talk, some self-coaching. Breathe and refocus my thoughts. A Nehemiah prayer. Dave, I'm not sure what that Nehemiah prayer is. I'm sure some of us would be curious to have you put that in the chat bar if you don't mind. Breath prayer.
Chapter 1.
Nehemiah chapter 1. Okay.
Yeah, so he's right there with the king and he's freaked out. He wants to go back and he's fearful for his life. And the king asks him, "Why are you downcast?" Then he had an instant prayer. And then God took care of him.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Who else wants to check out Nehemiah 1 now? Like, a little bit curious. Yeah, thank you, Dave. What else? Dennis said, my wife and I do a thankfulness prayer together 5 mornings a week at 7 a.m. I love that anchor, Dennis, that practice. Drink something refreshing or make a cup of coffee or tea, right? So chalice, kind of feeling yourself physically with something, it serves you on an emotional level too, it sounds like. I love that. Let's see. Breathe, stretch, pray. Check my to-do list. Do a short one, right? So just get something off of your list. Take some of the pressure off. Psalm 23 or the Jesus prayer. Pause breath. Grounding exercise, focusing on lists. Let's see. Listing what you're seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. Go barefoot in the backyard. Listen to a song. Pause and reflect on how I'm feeling. Touch base with a light heart. Pray, snack, dynamic stretching, brisk walk. Richie, it seems like you've done this exercise before. Walk through the garden, spin bike, coffee, water, organize in a journal, etc. Ask God for what I need, read my flashcards. Friends, this is really encouraging and cool. I was going to make a bad joke about this. Tells me it's okay to come back to you and that I don't need to be afraid of you melting down on me because now you've got your practices in place. But no, anybody else find this helpful though? Just to actually intentionally and proactively list out and kind of engage some of these things, have this cheat sheet. I've done this before with some coaching clients, and Some people actually just print it out and have it like right next to their desk, or, you know, right next to their computer or something, so that you have this quick access. How many of you have found that when you're in the moment, it's hard to remember what the practices are that bring you back to yourself when you've already kind of passed that point? And so having this quick reference to go to, there's a lot of power in this. Lorraine says, hide in the bathroom. I think my wife probably, no, I'm guilty of that one too. Yeah, hide in the bathroom, identify fear, do some good reflection. Yeah, great responses, friends. So if you would like to, of course, I don't need to say this, you're probably already doing it, but if you'd like to, then feel free and use some of these if this sparked anything for you to go back and add to your own list. So I'm going to add one more layer to this, and I'm not going to make you do it now, but this is the last layer that I want to add, and then we're going to open up for some dialogue, and then we'll end with a song. This is the next layer. It's one thing to generally know about some of these activities. It's another thing to take time to list them all out. It's a whole different thing to proactively put them in our schedule and front load them so that you don't have to guess when they're coming, or try to push aside other things to carve out room. So my challenge for each of you is to actually take this sheet, and this would be the ideal world, right? So I lead with Enneagram 7. You guys know me well enough, so I'm going to tap into that idealistic side of me for a moment. And I'm going to challenge you. What if you could have 1 week where each day you have multiple of the 5-minute ones scheduled into your day? Maybe even twice a week you have the 1 to 2 hour ones, right? And I skipped the 10 to 15-minute one, but what if each day you had little blocks of 5 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes that were scheduled into your day that you knew were anchor points for you to get refreshed? And then maybe once or twice a week you had the 1 to 2 hours, and then trying for once a week, but maybe it's starting out once a month, giving yourself 1 full day just for your own emotional and mental health. But what if you actually scheduled it in and front loaded it instead of trying to push everything else off to the side? Would any of you be willing to experiment with that, knowing that it might not work out perfectly at first? Anybody heard of a guy named Stephen Covey, who wrote a book? Actually, he lectured and people turned it into a book, which I'm learning from that skill. Got some stuff I'm working on, but he actually lectured and people turned it into a book, and it was called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he said, don't prioritize your schedule your priorities. Build emotional resilience into your schedule instead of always feeling like you're at the mercy of everything around you. Okay. This has been really fun for me to kind of hear from each of you. How many of you are finding something helpful in this so far? To be able to have some space to work through some of this. Let's open up the floor, and you can respond on any of these layers that you want. Maybe it has to do with some of you might want to take up the challenge to schedule these things in. Maybe some of you want to share how this has worked for you already in the past. But let's open up the floor. What thoughts or what things spark or stir in you as we've gone through this exercise this morning and had this conversation? Who'd like to share something? And not in the chat bar, but meaning with us verbally. Opening up the conversation. Josie, I see that hand. Mine says ask to unmute. So would you mind unmuting yourself? And we'd love to hear what you have to say.
All right, here I am.
Great.
I thought it was really great because it kind of made me realize how I do have these chunks of time, but I don't do any of these things in those chunks of time. So I had like a separate column that I made that said like what I tend to do, just as like a reflection, and seeing that all the time I'm like spending it like kind of with like in like frantic energy of like cleaning or trying to plan or checking emails, like all these things that I don't really need to do. And so I just really appreciate that this is such a great reflection to see, okay, wow, like I actually do have time. And just writing these things out and seeing them makes me feel like this potential of peace and energy. And so it's just exciting. But it's definitely, this is something I will need to post up around my house because it's so easy just not to do what is actually going to be good for my emotions. You know, it's easier to scroll or turn on the TV or frantically clean the house than listen to worship music or call a friend and etc.
Yeah. Josie, I love your honesty there. And that's, yeah, what a beautiful thing you tapped into about that. You can even feel the, like I heard hopefulness. Like I felt and heard hope kind of rising in you, that there are these things right in front of you, right, that you can engage. So thank you for sharing that. Who else resonated with what Josie shared as far as just kind of the reality, right? The distinction between what we do with our time and what would be worthwhile with our time. Yeah. Josie, I have an invitation for you. Knowing a little bit about your world, my challenge would be for you to send a copy of yours to Rachel and Rachel for a copy of hers and any of your roommates and whatever your roommate situation is. But what if we had people that cared about us? Like what if this is, I want to expand this out, but if I had Sarah's and if Sarah had mine, how beautiful would that be if we actually were intentional about pushing each other into these activities with permission, of course, right? So question for each of you would be, who's somebody that you might want to share this with, so that it's not in the form of accountability in like a scary legalistic sense, but in a somebody else has your back kind of way. Does anybody else think there's something to that possibility? Yeah. Josie, are you willing to consider that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, give a copy to your roommates, right? So yeah, Josie, I love what you shared there. Thank you. Who else has something that this sparks a reflection, or who else will share with us what this means for them? Timothy out to pasture. I see that hand.
I have, as I mentioned earlier, I have 3 friends who are nursing their dying spouses, and that puts things really in perspective for me. So that helps me when I get overwhelmed, you know, tying my shoe, just stop and think about what real overwhelm is. And yeah, Lord, I think I can handle this tying my shoe. I think I'll be okay. It somehow just helps me to have perspective for what other people, and we all have them. We all have these people in our lives that are facing overwhelming things. The other little number 2 is, I notice when I share with my friends, my accountability partners and stuff, so much of what I can look at them objectively and see that so much of what they're overwhelmed by is all self-imposed. They're not God tasks. They're not God callings. And I hope they all are for all of you, you know, that your life is overwhelmed with the calling of God. And I suspect that lots of it is this self-imposed overwhelm that's not necessary. You know, you're doing it to yourself. It's so easy to see in other people, hard to see in ourselves. But when we mirror that and say, wow, how am I overwhelming myself, Lord? How would you put this in perspective? So back to me.
Yeah, thank you, Timothy. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, what I heard in that, one of the words that I don't remember if we said in the chat bar, but one of the indicators for me that my emotional reservoir is more towards the full side is empathy instead of judgment, right? I'm starting to learn that there's a big difference between like empathy and judgment are contrasting postures towards people. And so, yeah, Timothy, thank you for sharing that. But who else? Just a couple more. I could listen to all of you all morning, because this is one of the things that, all right, this could sound like a call out, but did anybody put Coastlands in their 1 to 2 hour slot? Now's your chance if you haven't yet. Okay, Janie, brownie points, extra credit for Janie. We'll be sending you a financial gift of thank you for no. So let's hear from a couple more. What I see a hand raised. Cheryl, is that a high five, or is that you want to share something? Go ahead and
That's
unmute
a share.
Yeah.
That's a share. So I wrote on my list flybars, and then Josie mentioned, oh, I leave things around the house. Well, that's what I do, and that's what the flashcards are. So I write them, I decorate them, you know, I just make them kind of fun. And sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're prayers, you know, like, my Lord, I will always try to hear echo of thy footsteps, things like that. So I leave them around. And with the COVID, I ordered some of those markers where you can write on glass or windows, your mirrors. So my mirror in my bathroom, I don't know if you can see it.
That's awesome.
Full of things, so I can stand here and brush my teeth. Right up, I have circle love. Over here, have God is the doer, thy will be done. I have power, love, sound mind. I have my goal, meaning, not happiness. I have find my way to love the world. I have life is my teacher, pay attention. I have, Lord, is there more you want me to do about blank? And then I have, mind is the party pooper. I have, when feeling longing, be patient and prudent, moderation. And then I have meditate, tune to God, and apply this to all that I do.
That's cool, Cheryl. Thank you for sharing those with us. I love that. So
and I also I have an 86-year-old friend, and I send her one. I find a beautiful saying, and I grade it, and I send her one once a week.
I love that. That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
You're
Does
welcome.
anybody else? And I love that whole idea of brushing your teeth, right? 5 minutes, maybe. I have one of those electric toothbrushes that times me at 3 minutes. So 3 minutes, I could turn that into a powerful meditation on how I want to show up that day, right? So anybody else have things written on their mirror, or maybe note cards around some of those some of those places that you frequent that just help center you? I saw Christy's hand come up. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. Let's hear from, oh, I see Leslie's hand up. Leslie, will you unmute yourself? You're gonna have to do it, Leslie, because I can't.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'll show you mine. I made this board. So it's made out of wood and I painted it. You can buy it already pre-made, but it just felt better to make it on my own. And so I use chalk. It's a chalkboard. And so, for instance, this one, it's a phrase in French because I'm learning French and it reminds me like I want to learn French, and it's an inspiring phrase. I change it up seasonally depending on like the theme of what I'm going through, or it's like outside of my bedroom and outside of my bathroom, so I get to see it every time I walk by. And also for me, like I work out every day, I do yoga, I meditate, I do all these things, but I'm learning now that it's doing it in my mind. For instance, this morning I woke up and I was already sort of not being worried, but kind of stressed about the day. And today's my day off. Like, what did I have to worry about? And so I really like what you said about scheduling my priorities. Is that how you said it? And okay, my priority is to enjoy life today and be in the moment, because I can be doing yoga and worrying about something else, or I can be praying, but there's always this stress. And so to be actively training my mind to be at peace, and then everything follows. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, because I appreciate your honesty there, Leslie. For somebody that has all these practices that on the outside, right? Somebody could look like, oh yeah, she's totally doing all of this. But when you are able to acknowledge that your mind, the lack of integration or alignment, right? Of kind of what, just an invitation to deeper engagement with those practices on a mind level and a heart and soul level as well. Yeah, that's kind of what I was hearing through that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love that you're learning French.
Oh yeah,
that's
me
fun.
too. I'm conversational now. I only speak in present tense. I butcher the rest.
Yeah, I do the same in Spanish. You know that, so no.
Yeah.
By the way, just a fun fact for some of you that might be wondering, Leslie and I, Sarah and I got to lead Leslie's School of Biblical Foundations in 2003 or something, right? So Leslie and I have a lot of history here. So if you're wondering what the connection is, it goes that far back. So yeah, but thank you for sharing that. Okay, we have time for one more person. All right, Riley, I see that hand. What's sparking in you?
Sorry that my house is really loud, but I was just thinking it is kind of interesting to pay attention to, like you were saying, people struggled with the 5 minutes and the full day. And I feel like that kind of speaks a lot to like just living in balance, because I think when we're like too busy and we don't even know what to do with our 5 minutes to take time to breathe, and if that's all we get, like it's not enough. But like a full day of like can be kind of, at least for me personally, if I have a full day, it's like a little overwhelming and like kind of unstructured. So I think it's interesting that those middle gaps are easier to like fill your emotional reservoir, and like, if that makes sense, like living in enough structure but not like too overwhelmingly much. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know, that's kind of what I was thinking.
So
I don't know what that means.
I was going to say, what's one way that's landing for you, as far as how might that look tomorrow for you? Just kind of that insight, and then with what you're processing.
I think like right now, especially since I'm in like a transitional space between college and adulting, just like trying to I'm sorry, this music in the background. Like trying to structure more where I'm at. I don't know. Like I think like you said, like planning out these times before they happen, and not like making it to this 5 minute or full day of catching my breath and kind of taking it more. I feel like when you arrive at 5 minutes, you kind of take it more frantically rather than like planning it ahead of time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense, right? The difference between front loading it and kind of being able to, and Yeah, I think I'm tracking with you, Riley. And I mean, there's a lot you're processing, right, in that in-between space that's feeding into some of your processing with these practical kind of on the ground things. So thank you for processing with us. And yeah, I think what was I going to say with that? Yeah, well, I guess one thing that I've learned, how many of you have maybe noticed that even having them in your schedule, even seeing it on your calendar gives you energy, right? You don't even have to be at the activity yet, but how many of you have found that when you have something that you can look forward to, or when you know that it's coming, like when that breathing room is coming, even just that reality kind of helps you move forward with a little bit more strength or patience. Does anybody else ever feel that way? Like, okay, I can do this because I know this is coming. So I like, Riley, how you said like the difference between arriving at it and kind of just putting it there to get to, right? Or I guess the phrase I was using was front loading it. If you can front load that into your time, then it actually infuses a whole different kind of emotional energy into our time. So I'm just processing with you. I don't know if mine is making sense, but I'm experimenting with all this myself. So yeah. So friends, it's what time is it for you all? 11:23 Pacific time, I think. So this is what I want us to do to wrap up. I want us to land with a song that you probably haven't heard in this space before. Okay, I know it's super overplayed. I asked Sarah this morning, I was like, is it possible to overdo It Is Well With My Soul? She's like, I don't think it's possible. So I'm gonna put on It Is Well With My Soul for us again. And then I wanna leave you with the challenge and invitation to actually take some of these activities and put them in your schedule for the upcoming week, okay? But before we get there, I want to invite you to, just sit in and settle into this song with me as a form of meditation. So let's see here. Oops, I accidentally opened up a poll. All right. Friends, would you mind turning your video back on for the last 2 minutes so we can see all of your wonderful faces? All right. Last thing I want you to put in the chat bar, and then I'm going to leave you with a challenge and a blessing. Maybe not in that order. We'll see. What is one of the things that you put on your list that you want to commit to putting on your calendar for this upcoming week? Whether it's a 5-minute thing or whether it's a full day thing. What's one thing from your list that you know can be a lifeline for you and a bucket of emotional grace, a pocket of grace for you this upcoming week? Would you put it in the chat bar for us? Daily gratitude and thankfulness, Christy said. Okay, Josie put her phone away for 1 to 2 hours. Cheryl, meditation, morning and afternoon. Deep breathing, meditation. Okay, I won't read all of them, but go ahead and keep those coming. What we're going to do is I'm going to set up a thing to follow up and check in on you. No, I'm just kidding. I can't do that. But I really want to encourage you to take at least one, even up to 2 or 3 of these things and put them in your schedule. I would invite you to sometime, even the next half hour when we're off this gathering, to actually put some of these things in your calendar and see what a difference it makes for your emotional reservoir, for your equilibrium. So thank you for all that you shared. And yeah, so friends, thank you for your engagement and participation and life and energy as always this morning. And may you go knowing that you are on emotional solid ground, that you don't have to end up emotionally like I ended up physically, but you can go with emotional solid footing, and you can build that into your schedule. And may you go, most importantly, knowing that even if you can't do brain surgery in Jesus' name, you can endure and face all challenges through Jesus, who empowers you because he's with you and he's not overwhelmed. So may you go in that awareness, and may you lean into those pockets of grace this week. And we say, thank you, Holy Spirit. We will have more, please, of that empowerment. Amen for now. So be it for now. So friends, I'd love to stick around we had a really lively breakout conversation last 2 Sundays ago. And I'd love to stick around for just a few minutes and see if anybody wants to have a little after party. So if you need to go, then go in grace and peace and emotional equilibrium. And so go ahead and sign off now. We're going to dismiss officially, but would you say goodbye either in the chat bar or with a wave, kind of dismiss yourself, wave yourself out of the room, and we'll see who sticks around and what we want to do from